Ty sent a snap to our whole group chat and was like, guess who started her period? I was like, wait, this means that I'm gonna have my flower dance this year.
Okay. How many fingers? So you're blinded for what, 4 days, and then we remove your top.
It's going to be right in the center.
And you're reborn as a woman.
When they ask us, well, what was your flower dance like? And then you're like, well, I didn't have one. And then it's like, well, why?
So just like everything we do, right? We put good thoughts into that food.
So dance floor is your world. Don't be afraid of anything that comes out there. We all got you.
So now you're coming in as a girl, and you're going to come out a woman. That's what we do. We perfected that process.
All right, Cindy. Well, I love you. You're going to do great, okay?
Okay. Love you.
Okay, see you in the morning.
See you.
Alme Allen is Ati's father, who we see in Long Line of Ladies. Alme is a Karuk and Ihuk traditional and contemporary multimedia artist, designer, cultural consultant, and mentor from the Lower Klamath River in Humboldt County, California. With his work deeply rooted in cultural traditions, Alme designs and executes bold public art projects that inform and educate communities about California's indigenous peoples. His work centers around the themes of continuing tribal presence, community healing, and honoring tribal peoples' connection and commitment to their land. Alme is committed to actively preserving and passing on cultural traditions to future generations. He, along with his extended family, is responsible for caretaking and holding ceremonies for the Karuk people. Alme operates Karuk Carver Studios and is the co-director and co-founder of Spawning Ground, a newly formed nonprofit organization which supports California Indian healing, wellness, and joy by revillaging spaces through Indigenous presence and projects. He also serves on the Ihuk Tribe Construction Corporation's Board of Directors and is an art and design consultant for new public buildings in Ihuk County. So please help us welcome Alme.
Thank you. Boy, that's a heck of a resume I got going there, or bio anyways.
Well deserved, well deserved.
It sounds like a really cool job. Does anybody else want to do that job with me? Because I've got room. It doesn't pay very well. I'll tell you that.
I don't see any hands yet, but maybe by the end of the interview, there'll be a couple of takers.
Yeah,
I may come and do it. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah, I'll put the invite out right now. If anybody's ever in far Northern California, come visit with us, please. It's a beautiful place, and I think the film showcases that really well. I was telling Julia, texting, that I'm watching the film with you guys because I really don't watch it a lot, and so it's kind of nice to go through that journey again myself, and it made me realize, reaffirm that we're from a really beautiful place on earth, and we're part of something really vital to our people, and it's good to be part of this movement.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're honored to have the time and the opportunity to share the story with people in the Tanenbaum community. Shaandiin, I want to go to you for a second and talk about, we started a project at Tanenbaum that we called Representing Religion. We soft launched it last year. And so we understand the power of self-representational storytelling, especially as it relates to religious and spiritual communities. And so, we all see a lot of TV shows and films with a focus on lived experiences. And through that, we can share about ethical representations of religious and spiritual and faith communities. So I'd like to ask you, from the perspective of a storyteller, can you take us back to the beginning and what inspired you to tell this story?
Yeah, I guess Rika, my co-director, was the first one who was a part of this film as it like stood, and she just came off of her film Period End of Sentence, which was an Academy Award winner for Best Short Doc, and she wanted to continue the trajectory of making a film about menstrual positivity, and so the foundation behind this, the PAD project, basically gave us funding to create this story, and they wanted a spin instead of a traumatic or taboo viewing of like what menstruation is. They wanted a positive representation of that, and so that's where Rika invited me in the process. We had never met before, but I think the most pivotal part for me was like when I was growing up, I guess. I'm Dene from the Southwest. We also have a puberty ceremony called the Kinolta, and you get it when you have your first period too. And so it's very similar, although very different from the Ihuk. And I think, or I guess when I first got my period, I grew up in a non-traditional setting. And so I was like what they call an urban native. And I got my period, and I like, my grandma was like the first to find out, basically. We were on the res, and she's like, okay, it's time for your ceremony. And I was like, no, like there's no way, because I was ashamed of it. I didn't understand what it was. My family never explained it to me. I didn't understand that part of like my ancestry, I guess. And so I kind of rejected my own ceremony. And it's like a joke now, like whenever I go to help out with ceremonies, like, you're not a woman yet. It is actually a very key part of like why I wanted to do this project, was because like I never had that experience for myself. And I think representation, as you were saying, plays a key role in how people view themselves and how like you see yourself represented on a screen, in books, or like wherever in media. And I didn't see that ever growing up. And that's like why I feel like I rejected that part of myself. And so I wanted to make something that a younger me would be very excited about and would make me say like, yes, I want to have my Kinolta. And I mean, I think we accomplished something that like, I don't know, I haven't watched it in a bit either. And I was like kind of like tearing up, like not at my own work, but just at the beauty of the Karuk people and like Ati and her family. And it's like a giant hug. And that's how it felt like while we were filming too. It was just like so nice to be welcomed in, even though I'm from a different tribe. Like we're like miles and miles away on a map, but we can still find a connection over something.
So powerful. Alme, you know, we talk about at Tanenbaum life transformative ceremony and the importance and the value of ceremony. And in the film, the flower dance is referred to at one point as a life way. And there are formative ceremonies at the center of various faiths and cultures and traditions. So, but the history of Ihuk reminds us of the importance of creating and upholding those conditions. And so I wondered if you could talk to us about the timeline of the Ihuk ceremony, including when the ceremony could not be safely practiced, because we see that at the very beginning of the film. And I wondered if you could just share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, certainly, because it is very important. You know, the words flash down or flash through at the beginning of the film, and that kind of sets the stage in a way and informs the viewer of, you know, important information that needs to be shared out. And you know, I think the most key is the acknowledgement of the traumatic conditions that our people were going through at that time in contact, at the point of contact, which was California Gold Rush. And, you know, 1850, you know, we all hear 1849. That's the, you know, that's the gold rush. But here in the northern area, it was about a full year later. And so that is a, you know, that timeline is our history, and it's also our horror, if you will, for Indigenous people of California. That was basically the year for us in the northern part of the state where our world was turned completely upside down. And at that time, it was, you know, fight or flight. And it's kind of, I think, you know, if you were to be there, or anybody that was in that kind of trauma, or anybody that experienced genocide, basically, what can you hold on to? Your house is literally burning down. Who can we save, or what can we save? What's important in that house? And I think for us, California people, just making it to see the next day was what was important. And as the years progressed after that date of 1850 for us on the Klamath River, it was purely survival. And during those years, I think that's when Ihuk was sort of put away, if you will, out of protection for our young women and our women because of the sexual violence that was committed to them. You see, you'd have to imagine our land, our area, the river, the riverway that we're attached to, be flooded with non-native miners, and the miners didn't bring any women with them. They didn't come as families. They came as people that wanted to get rich, right? And you know, so at that time, our women became you know, targets, and our men, the men were simply murdered. And so that is our history. It is grim. But I think building into this and up to this story in this film, it shows you light, right? So to me, going throughout that timeline and understanding that somewhere soon after 1850, this dance was put away for those reasons, and then slowly, you know, on its way coming back, but it wasn't really, I don't think, really a thought until maybe the 1970s, 1980s, when things started to really pick up around here and really pull a lot of culture back into our daily. So we went through, you know, decades, years, many years of very grim times. And when we actually, the old timers thought that a lot of our ceremonies and our ways were going to go away, you know. These are old timers that were sent to residential schools and all of those forms of assimilation. So then there was that wave that we had to deal with, all of that, where the language was being taken from us and our traditional ways were being taken from us. So, I mean, it's nothing short of amazing that we were able to make this film about a dance, which is really about a culture that at one time was literally hanging by a thread. And that was my wife and I, Pim. We come up in the 70s when things were starting to pick up. And so we're really fortunate to come up in that time and be around, some of the old people that still remembered those ways. But it was really the people in between them that taught us a lot. And that kind of, then take you up to the early 90s when we started rebuilding this dance and relearning it and finding out everything we needed to do to assemble the dance again. And it took a lot of pieces. And specifically, my cousin Lynn Risling headed it up. She had a daughter coming of age. And we had Geneva's dance in 1995. And that was the beginning of the return of Ihuk. And now it's what these generations will only know.
Yeah.
So that's the really beautiful thing about it.
Thank you so much. I have two questions. One is there something or what were the conditions in the 70s and the 80s that made it such that it seemed that it was time to return and time to start bringing this forward? Was there anything or any number of combination of factors that led to that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, and some of them, that's a really good question. Some of these things were going on throughout the country, civil rights movement, it was the time to move. It was the time for social movement, right? And for us, it was the American Indian movement. All of these things were kind of happening around the same time. But that was just the time to move. And it was, I think, kind of looking at it now with the analytical lens, it came at just the right time for our people. I like to tell a story about, I heard my grandfather, my grandmother speak of it, and they were born right around the turn of the century or right before the turn of the century, and talk about the 40s and 50s, where the ceremonies that were being conducted were just not being conducted in a healthy way because of the impacts that from alcoholism and things like that. And so a lot of the old dance leaders, the ceremonial leaders, were kind of thinking about basically calling it quits because we couldn't do it right anymore. And then it was really, I think, somewhere around the late 60s where it was that generation. I'll honestly say it was a generation that started going off and going to college and going to school and coming back to their communities was part of it. And so it was them that really took this they really took this job of revitalization to their own, and took every bit of knowledge they could from the people of the day. And now when I look back on it, there was really only a handful of elders that had a lot of the knowledge that passed it on to those people. So I just really think that, you kind of look around the country and what was going on, and, the 70s was just the time to move. And, and it was really sort of like late 80s, early 90s, where then things got pretty solid. And that was, sort of our experience, coming up in the cultural world. Yeah,
it's amazing. Thank you so much. Shaandiin, you and your co-director, Rika, you do an incredible job in this documentary of telling Ati's story. It's visually captivating, and what you've chosen in terms of the language and the moments of dialogue that get captured and promoted. I have watched this film maybe 3 or 4 times, and every time I see something different. So it's amazing. There is a lot of respect and trust that's involved when people share other people's stories. So, and we see that in the film. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of filming something like this that is so intimate? And what are some of the relationships or even memories that were created as a result of doing that?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that came up when we started talking about the film was the act of filming the ceremony and respecting the decision to not film it. And I think there was in very early conversations, we were going to film the ceremony and it was going to be a part of the film. But I think all of us kind of took a step back. We took a step back with the family and talked about it and talked about what do we need to see from actually as an audience viewing the ceremony that will give us more information than not seeing it. And I guess for me as a film person, I feel you see so many, especially when it comes to marginalized communities films or specifically Indigenous people's films or Native people's films, you don't often see I guess a perspective that doesn't have conflict. A doc made by a non-Indigenous person about this might talk more about the violences that were done upon the woman, and be more of a historical film and one that was like based in stereotypes or romanticism. And I think for us, what we wanted to do was like really step away from all of those things that like make Indigenous films like what they are from other people's perspectives, and really challenge ourselves to make something that felt like being a part of a ceremony without having to view it. And I think with that, like respect comes innately, because like you are just wanting to view people as they are, like view them in their day to day, see that ceremony is like an act of doing things every day. It's like an act of like sitting together with your family in the living room. Like there's so many parts of ceremony that make it what they are, that aren't even like what the ceremony is. And so I feel like it's really important for me to see that, because you don't see Native people just being a family. You don't see, like, I think the one thing that when we first met them was, and we were so inspired by, was just like how loving and how like they're with each other all the time, how like all of the family is always coming over to the house, or like they're always like going somewhere else to like meet up with each other and just like hang out, and like they're like always sharing stories. And like the amount of times we were like filming or not filming because we shot on film, and like we were just sitting there and like watching, was like, wow, like this is amazing what's happening. Like this family, like to not capture like them as they are in the modern day would be a disservice to show like what ceremony is and like what the work that they put into it, because it's so much work that you have to put in to like live a life that has traditions and has ceremony, and not everybody has the privilege for that.
And it was really interesting to me, because it was, to your point, there is this experience where it's the ceremony, and it's kind of like everyone knows what they're supposed to do, and everyone is attending to what they're supposed to do. And it's very kind of normal and almost matter of fact, where to the viewer, we're just kind of like hanging on every word and watching every moment. It's just, it was very intimate for me as a viewer. It was very intimate, and I felt somewhat privileged, but also a little, should I be watching? Like, is this, and I'm glad that you didn't include the ceremony for that reason, because to me, it would have been kind of like, I shouldn't be watching this. This is not for me to see.
Yeah, I feel like even like within the cinematography, we talked about it originally, about like how we wanted it to feel like the camera like was the perspective and of the audience, and like wanting to be respectful, like taking a step back for the most part, like trying to view things from further away, or like really not get too close up when you don't need to be close up, like really like treating it as a space in which you want the audience to engage in that space. And then like by the end of it, I think more than anything, like you want an audience to feel like they don't have to see the ceremony to understand anything about the film. Like they see everything that this family is doing, and like the love that they put into this, and like to see the ceremony would like almost not give it any more meaning than it has.
Right. I'm clearly moved by the movie. I don't know about y'all. So Alme, I want to come back to you. So the Ihuk is a ceremony that celebrates this pivotal moment for young Karuk girls entering womanhood, but it's also more than that, because we see how it involves participation from the entire community. And I wonder if you could talk about the importance of having support from many community members. And I have to say, the ways in which the men of the community are so deeply committed and clear about their role, what they're there for, how they're integral to the part, was really, really interesting and exciting. So could you just talk about the community experience?
Yeah, so like Shaandiin was saying, it was what should we film and what should we not film, and having Shaandiin there as a director, I think was really important, because though we're not from the same people, we have a lot of the same values, and I think that really resonated throughout the film. It definitely did for me. But what we had to offer, and it's kind of what you guys were talking about, was we could offer the preparation for the dance, because I think, you know, one, we never intended on actually sharing the ceremony itself, but you know, we can share all of this preparation, which we do as a family and an extended family. And, you know, there'll often be 20 to 30 people in the house, or, you know, whichever house we choose, somebody in the family, and work on the dance stuff, work on the regalia. You see us working on the feathers. You see people working on preparing the food, like the acorns, and you see the maple bark skirt being rendered out. So what all of, to me, what all of this is, and it's very healing for us, is we're creating our own village, right? Even though we're not, you know, actively living in the actual village where we actually do the ceremony, we're living near there, but our house becomes the village, right? And when we invite all the family in to help us prepare for this, you know, this big event, the young ladies coming of age, we just have a good time. This is when we feel the most healed, right? I mean, the ceremony is great, and we definitely have that experience, but it's really just when people get together. And I think that really, for me, comes through in the film. And like you're saying, that the involvement of the men, you know, and I don't think that's entirely unique. I think that's the way it works with probably a lot of other Indigenous people as well. You just happen to see like the broad spectrum of people that are all getting ready for this one thing. And it's this, you know, this change from a girl to a woman.
It's amazing. Thank you. So I have another question. You know, our mission at Tanenbaum is to reduce prejudice and hatred and violence for people of all beliefs and people who do not necessarily have an affiliated faith tradition. So part of that work for us is creating opportunities for people to learn about identities other than their own, and then to be able to build empathy and understanding in the presence of information and people that we may not know. So for me, this story is really a story about empowerment on a number of levels. And it certainly reveals truths about not just the individual experience, but about life experiences and moments of transition. So having said that, I'd love to hear each of you talk about what the film means to each of you. I mean, I've noticed that you've both talked about not actually having watched it many times, which I understand, but so what does it mean to you? What has it done for you, if anything?
I think this film for me is something that it's such a special thing to be a part of. I think it has changed my life in a lot of ways. It's changed how I've wanted to make films. It's changed how I view myself as a Native woman. It's changed like how I feel like I belong to a community, and that it's reciprocal. Like what I put into it is like what I'll get out of it. I think more than anything, I guess this film, even though it is about Ati and it is about the empowerment of a young woman, it is about like a community coming together to uplift her. And I think to see that is so special. And even to like reminisce about like my own growing up, even though I did grow up in an urban Native situation and didn't get to like participate in traditional ceremonies when I was younger, I still think about like the community that like brought me up. And I think there's something very special about like these communities we have and these relationships that you have with each other, with like the land that you're on, with all of these things. In Navajo, it's called ke, which is like your relationship to everything around you. And I think it's really taught me to like respect those relationships and understand that the world is like such a moving mechanism that is like based on those relationships, and like you need to put effort into those in order to get something back out of it. And it's not individual at all. It's like, it's less of like, what can I do for me to like feel good, and or it's like, what can I put into the community to like build up the community more. And I think this film has like definitely brought that perspective to me.
Thank you so much. Alme, how about you?
Yeah, so a couple things, and I really, one of the things that I think the message needs to be, just put out there, that this society today teaches us to put self first, right? I mean, it's kind of what this world seems to be about, where what this film shows you is that it's really about the collective, and the collective of people are what heals. And so I, as an artist, I'm always looking at these just really harsh contrasts between our old ways and the way that society performs today. I look at things in this culture today, where people that have a lot of money have absolutely no commitment to their community. And I look at our old ways and our systematic ways with ceremonial leaders and what we call dance owners. In our area, we don't have chiefs and things like that. We have like headmen and people that are ceremonial leaders. That's our leadership. And so these ceremonial leaders are of wealth. They have wealth in the Indian way. And what that really means is that they have more commitment to their community, right? So it's a total contrast to what's going on in today's world. Now, whether you got that from the film or not, but that's what I see. It's more about the collective before self. And I know that resonates with a lot of people when they see how many people came together for this young woman. And the other thing is like telling truths and allowing others to learn about our culture, and hopefully that sharing out builds an understanding with the broader community. And that understanding is that not all Native people are the same. We don't all speak the same language. We don't all dance like we see on TV. In fact, the Karuk people, it's very unique. Our ways are very unique, and I kind of went into this understanding that a lot of people, even our Native people around the country, don't know much about California Native people. And so that was sort of one of my side notes in wanting to do the film, is like create an understanding within our own community. So that's what that's what I got. Like, hope people got out of the film.
And I just want to highlight something that you said, and I want to make sure that I get it right, that people's wealth is a condition of their commitment to their community.
Yeah. So,
y'all get that?
So in our way, like the wealth of having the things you can have in your hand, whether it's the shell money that are necklaces, or the hides and all the things that we use for dance. See, and here we go with like religion. So it's all wrapped into one. So the things that go into the dance, the things that we wear, are also forms of wealth. So the spiritual and the commerce sort of come together in a really beautiful way. And so really, and then when you really break it on down, to me, what I've learned in my years is that what the wealth really is having people and having community that are willing to collaborate and work towards something that creates an overall positive. And how well can you bring these people together? That's one of my new definitions of wealth, realizing that you don't do anything in this life alone. It requires, other people. It requires community. And so I just like this investment in young people. We come by it pretty honestly, because I think that's one of the foundations to our culture. And it's and now it's just as vital as it ever was that this is getting passed on to the young people. And I have no doubt that Ati, and then her cousin Hune and her cousin Hazel, who are in the film. They've all had their Ihuks in succession right after Ati. So the two younger cousins, they just stair-stepped it right through. And when I just watched the film again, I was just thinking about those girls right there, watching them and watching how all three of them have grown up so much since we shot this film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we have some time for some questions. Does anybody? Oh, hands are shooting up immediately. Hold on one second. The microphone is coming to you.
You've each talked about the role of community, but I was still struck by the role that men play in this ceremony, because, in a quinceañera, for example, the whole community comes out to celebrate, but it's the women that do the planning. And to see the men actually helping to put the skirt together and the feathers and so forth, was that historically the case? And if so, what do you attribute to that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it's pretty accurate to how everything would be done in our area. Our cultural ways of our people, like rules or laws, you could call them. Sometimes some people call them river laws. What men can do and what women are allowed to do within the culture. And yes, the men will actually kind of run the dance part of it. So putting on the dance itself, and then the women are in control of what's going on with the young lady that's who the Ihuk is for, and they isolate her and care for her, and she has to do all of these different formulas, certain activities during the day as she's fasting. And then they bring her out, and when she's ready, then the men form up and we all dance, with her and around her. And so, yeah, that's just the way it kind of works in our culture. They'll say there's the men's side and the women's side of the house. And so the duties are pretty evenly split on a lot of this stuff. And then, if it's speaking, clearly about like the change that this young woman's going through as far as having her period and being able to bring life into the world. And so kind of let that be known that really what this is about is the significant marker in her life is that now she can create life. And that's why we do this dance in the spring, right? Because the life is coming back into the land. So thinking about that, all of these things make so much sense that the ways that we had laid before us, they were set in play by the environment itself, not just the old people that taught us things. It was the land. It always goes back to the land for us, for sure.
Are there any other questions? Yes. Oh, hold on one second for the mic, because he's not going to be able to hear you without it.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm speechless for sure, but I am curious, what kind of what kind of bird did you use?
Yeah, so that piece, that regalia is called a tav, and so that's a blinder. So it mentions it in the film that I talk about it a little bit vaguely, and then Elder Julian Lang goes in and just really hits it out of the park with what he says about being blinded from the world yet feeling it. That's what that part's. I mean, he just absolutely nailed it, and he's one of our mentors. He was one of the ones that brought back the Ihuk along with his wife. He's married to my cousin, and so it was her daughter that we had that first one for at 95. So those are blue jay. It's actually a Stellar's jay. And there's a reason why we use that. It's in the old stories. There's an entire story that goes along with this Ihuk. It's kind of a little bit more of a saga. It's like one story leads into the other. It's not really a creation story, but it's very much the fabric of our people.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have time for a few more, I think. Yes, we have one in the back. Hold on for the microphone.
Hi. I don't know if I read this right, but in the beginning, supposedly the dance hadn't been performed in 120 years. Is that correct? So was it written down somewhere? How did you know how to follow it? Is it institutional knowledge or was it passed on by word of mouth?
Yeah, so it was, and though it wasn't performed for 120 years, there were still people that carried it, if you will. And if you think about a generation, how quickly a generation can happen, or think about it more like how long can an elder live, you know? So if you went from one elder that lived to nearly 100 to another that lived for nearly 100 and was accurately able to pass that along, that's how we got it. And on top of that, there was ethnographic work done in our community, which was vital to it. And my cousin Lynn did use every resource that she could. She read everything that she possibly could, and then also referenced every elder that was still alive at the time that was able to contribute to it. And, you know, stories that were passed on to other families. So she compiled a lot of information just to bring this thing back around.
How long can an elder live? That's gold. Oh my goodness. That's gold right there. Because that's a lesson for all of us. You know, I think about this really did make me think. I mean, I had no such associated ceremony, and I know that there are any number of peoples and communities, both religious and spiritual and not religious, that have these ceremonies. I had no such ceremony. And I couldn't come, I came away from, I was like, well, what happened with mine? Like, I want a ceremony too. Kind of too late, but still, it really did, but it did make me think more for my family with food and various recipes that I know I've got limited time to actually get that recipe if they're willing to give it with all the ingredients, because that's the piece too. Sometimes they leave out an ingredient. But you know, really looking into our own experiences to see what are those things from our elders that we want to capture and make sure that we hold, not for ourselves, but for the community, so that we actually are passing things down and holding them. So that's beautiful. I don't know where I am with time. Okay, I have no more time left. Okay. So I want to thank Google again, all of you and our panelists, Shaandiin and Alme. Thank you so much for sharing so candidly and so lovingly with us, and for sharing yourselves and sharing your story with us. It has definitely, I think, touched everyone in this room in a very real way. We can't thank you enough for the generosity and the vulnerability. So thank you for that. I did want to remind everyone of just some upcoming events that we have. We have our workplace program is going to be hosting our 8th annual, I think it's 8th or 9th, Religious Diversity Leadership Summit on May the 8th. That's going to be held at Bloomberg. Bloomberg is hosting us that day. And we also have our summer soiree, which will be held on July 11th at the Sky Lounge, which is on 5th Avenue. So you can find out more about those events on our website. And we do have food and refreshments out in the lobby. So if I was rushing you through the lobby so we can start, it's all still there. So all of the food and refreshments are still there. And again, thank you, Julia, for all of your extraordinary work on this event. And I don't see Nancy. I'm not sure where Nancy is. She's outside. So Nancy is outside. Nancy Wolf, our Director of Development, in her physical absence. Thank her and thank you. And thank you all for making time to come and with this exploration with us. We really do appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at another event in the future. Thank you.